Hi there, welcome back to the DevOl. I am Roman, and today we are going to stream again. So this is the first stream in 2020, so Happy New Year to all of you. Yes, we are going to continue our stuff. So the first thing I do is I introduce my guest again. It's Zaid again. So hi there, Zaid.
Hello, Roman. How's it going?
I'm good actually. Not that tired as last one. So yeah, of course. So we are going to do our thing again. So the first thing, what I wanted to say is if you want to support this channel in any way, let me just check this here. Yes, you can do this on the Ko-fi page of this channel. It's ko-fi.com. /the DevOl, but there is also a link in the description. I think Zaid still doesn't have anything, but he still takes pull requests.
Not yet. Yeah, all the time.
So this is basically how you can pay him, or also how you can support him. Yeah, so what are we going to do today, Zaid?
So we're going to start with where we left off last time, which is the Elmish hackernews clone application.
Yes.
If you haven't been with us last time, we were building basically a very simple application that loads up story items from hackernews, the website that posts really cool stuff about programming, about math. So it basically has an API which you can call through HTTP. So last time what we did is we built an application that loads these items and shows them on screen. The way we did it was pretty okay because of the way the API works. It has to load the items separately, which we then aggregate in a single operation. We will talk about that through the code.
Yes.
But basically what we did is we aggregated a bunch of asynchronous operations to load all the items at the same time. But today we want to do it differently.
Yes, definitely.
And make it a little bit more responsive, so to speak, not in the sizing kind of way, but have the application react to the loading of separate items as they come in, instead of aggregating all the items in one go and showing them on screen.
Yes, definitely. And if you have missed the last episode, don't worry. We will go quickly over the whole thing. So
yeah,
there is no we can't hear you, we can't see you yet in the chat. So I hope I did everything right. Everything works. By the way, I have this new background thing here somewhere. Let me know how you like this. I tried my best not to. Oh, this is strange here. To have a nice background here. So let me know if you like this. I pretty like it. So okay, I switched to the screen, and I think. Oh fuck, we are not there. No, it's there. It's there.
We are.
It's there. Okay, because I had so many problems with my screen capture today because it completely broke down. So every stream something completely new breaks down. This time it was the screen capture, so I had to fiddle in the NVIDIA settings, but it's working now. So if there are any problems, please tell me. So let me go back to the chat, so just in case somebody is writing something. All right, so first things first, shall we show the application, how it looked, or
yep.
what the starting point is?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to see.
We have a link in the description about the repository from which we will continue on.
Yes.
So if you want to join along, just clone the repository. If you have the right prerequisites, of course, on your machine to start with F# and Fable, you could just clone the repository, npm install, npm run, and you should be up and going to code along if you want.
Yeah, cool. And the thing is, this is not completely where we left off. So this is, we didn't build in tabs last time. So we didn't want to do this today because we want to concentrate on this parallelizing stuff thingy.
Exactly.
So it's still compiling. So what are you going to see now is basically the same app as last time. Here we have couple of more comments in there, but it's basically the same. And we have, when it's compiled, some bad time, we will see, hopefully, let me just get this up here, that this will load up, hopefully soon.
It is taking longer than usual,
yes,
right?
I'm not sure why, because it's maybe because my PC needs like, it's streaming, it has OBS on, it has Skype on. We are
Skype
using
and
TeamViewer for desktop sharing, so
it's quite the setup.
Yeah, it's, man.
Let's hope it works. Anyways, we can just go through the code in the meantime, right?
Let's go through it.
So last time we had this, can I take over the VS Code scrolling? All right, cool. So last time we had this thing where we had the Hacker News items coming from Hacker News API. We described this item using this type, the Hacker News item, which has an ID, a title, and a URL. We added in this example, we added also a score, which is available from the API, and also an item type, which is a string that is available on every Hacker News item. It's because not all, because last time we loaded the top stories basically from the API. But the thing is, from Hacker News, it's not just the top stories. You have the top stories, you have the jobs, you have the best stories, and the news stories, and you can get the type. And for each type of stories, there's an item type, which is a string. And even stories can have comments, which are actually other Hacker News items, basically. So it doesn't have to be story items, but for our purposes, we will be just be loading these items as we will be just loading the top level story items, so not the comments or the related stuff with it.
Let me just, I think it should have loaded.
Yeah.
Let me just reload this here. It's already slow. Okay. And
there you go.
Here you see we are now on the new tab. So with the new story items, they have only 1 or 2 points. So we included the score and the little icon in there. And then we have like the top stories, and we're loading all of them in parallel. And you see here access to Wikipedia restored in Turkey. Good. And we have the best stories, show Hacker News, ask Hacker News, and some job listings. And
so we have basically a URL. For each tab, we have a different URL that loads the same data, basically. And we're just showing it as a list of information. The thing is, every time we are loading the data, like we said from the last stream, we have to load we have to first load the IDs of the items first, and then in a different request for each ID, we had to send another request to get the information about a Hacker News item, a single Hacker News item. So what we did, we basically for each category, the new, the top, the show, we basically aggregated all the requests for these IDs into a single asynchronous request using async parallel. We can look at it right below. Let's see where that was. Here, as you can see, we have the stories, which is basically just an enum, right? Which decides the URL endpoints, as shown here. It basically just makes up the URL from which the items are loaded. And here we have an async operation that loads a single item, and we have an async operation that loads all the items by taking the first 10, taking the first 10 IDs, then mapping them to load the item from that ID. And then there's this crucial part where we say async parallel, which combines all these operations into a single one, and then makes a single operation out of that to get the results as a single entity, basically.
And here we're just filtering the ones out that didn't really work out, so where something broke. So we only take the ones where we get in some of an option case in here. So we only get the good ones, and then we have here this load story items is finished with the story items that we have encoded and loaded.
Exactly. So the thing is, things can go wrong when either the parsing of the JSON can go wrong or either HTTP errors can go wrong. HTTP can go wrong with maybe Hacker News is down or something. In which case we won't get a story item. We will just get none, and we just chose to basically filter out the things that don't work and only get the things that do work.
Yes.
Pretty simple stuff. But the thing is about this implementation is that the user has to wait for the loading of all items before any information is shown on screen. Now, the application you saw is pretty fast. Like, it loads these items really, really quickly. But if you happen to have a bad connection, or you just, a bad connection, for example, then you would be needlessly waiting for the longest of the operations to finish. So if you're loading 10 items and one of them takes 10 seconds and the other ones take 1 second, you still have to wait 10 seconds before you see
anything,
something on screen. What we want to do in this stream is try to make the application such that we start showing items as soon as they're loaded individually.
Yes.
So we basically, instead of combining them using async parallel as a single operation, we will instead be triggering multiple operations that each of which load a different item and have the application react to it as more data come in.
Yes. So I'm just showing a nice GIF in here where we can actually see this. So here you see, this is what we want to build in the end, right? So you see here that each item has its own spinner, and that the first item, so it's not from top to bottom or bottom to top. So the first, it's just whatever comes back first from the Hacker News servers is shown first in our page. So this is basically what we want to build in the end.
Yeah, I think this is a really important concept, because even though the example here is very simple, imagine if you had like a content management system, right? Where you log into the dashboard and the dashboard has these panels, right? Every panel has maybe like a tasks panel or a sales overview panel and some other kinds of panel, maybe 10 of these panels. What you want to do is, once the user logs into your dashboard, you want to start loading the data of each panel separately.
Yes.
You don't want to load everything in one request, which you can, and then show all the data at once, because that wouldn't be like a cool user experience. I would say you will see spinners all over the place, hopefully, and then at some point they're all
going to resolve.
They're all loading instead of showing the information that is readily available. Maybe for some requests you have to compute something which takes longer. But now you can, but like following this strategy of loading, you can have different parts of an application loading different things at the same time, just because we can have things that trigger messages, and as long as the result is a message, we can process it separately and have the application re-render based on every message that comes back.
So I'm going to close this here. So shall we just go quickly through the application, how the top thing works, and then we can show how are we going to build it?
Sure.
Okay. So
the tab.
Go for it.
All right. So we have these tabs, right? We have the stories type. Which is actually a stories category, but I simplified it into just stories. It's basically an enum, where every enum, like I said, maps to an endpoint from which we load the items, and then we have a little piece of the UI that goes through. So we have a function that renders a single tab based on the current story. We have the current stories, and we have the stories I want to render, and also the dispatch function. So that if the current stories is the stories I want to render, then give it the class is active to make it blue. and when you click on it, if it's not the current story, then change the story basically. And here it shows a span using the name like a stringified string coming from the.
We have this simpler syntax pattern matching here. So if we have a function with only one parameter, you can use this function syntax. You don't need to put the parameter or the input parameter in here and then say match this input parameter. You can use this nice little syntactic sugar here. And this is basically what translates the cases of the discriminated union to a string that can be shown here in the HTML span, right?
Yeah. So then after having these two functions that renders a single tab, and we have a bunch of these stories, so we render a bunch of tabs, right? Mm-hmm. So we use the function render tab in render tabs that takes the current story and loops through all possible stories and render tabs from them. Mm-hmm. So here we have some Bulma classes, tabs, is toggle, and is full width. They tend to look more usable for mobile. That's how like the examples are made, just to make the UI simple, mm-hmm. right? I don't want to make a desktop specific application. It's just a simple mobile-like application. So the first thing it shows the tabs, and it loops through all the stories. One thing I see, I find interesting in the F# community, and especially people using Elmish, sometimes I see them not defining enums like this, but using reflection to, using reflection to loop through all possible enum values. I don't know what to think about it. What do you think about it?
I don't like it.
I don't like it either.
No, where did you see it? I have never actually seen it. I can understand the urge to do it because it feels then like a bit more bloated, or I need to have a lot of boilerplate putting this in. But you can be really specific, and my experience is that all this I can abstract from this stuff breaks pretty much when the first change request comes in, where you say, but except for jobs.
Exactly, you know? Exactly.
So and then you change either your structure or make some things. I don't really like it. I'm most of the time I'm not a big fan of magic, and I've
seen it only in examples actually. So it's not I haven't seen it in like a big applications.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No, me neither. The thing is, if you start using reflection in your own library code, that would be like a place where you have to like put some warning signs on top. Why do you need reflection in your application code? Maybe in libraries where libraries tend to do the magic and leave the magic there. That's totally fine. I do that all the time. Don't look at the source code. But for applications, I wouldn't recommend to go anywhere near reflection. Just use whatever you have basically, and it comes down to a simple structure.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
So that was a little detour. Basically, we have render tabs, and every tab gets a dispatch function. As you can see, we just keep passing the dispatch function down to the render tabs, and then to render tab, and then we can so that a single tab can dispatch the change stories event, from which we start off the asynchronous operation to load all the story items. So that's basically that's about it. That's not been covered from last time, right?
Okay. So one thing I want to talk about is this, because we're going to talk about it anyway, I think. So let's just get this out of the way. Where do I find it? We have this async operation event here, right? Where we can have a look at it.
It's an extension
where we have we have some async operation, and it can be started and finished, and our finished stuff is most of the time a result of something. So either it was successful or not, and we talked about it I think last week, And we were talking about changing the name because it's a bit cumbersome. I think you settled to async operation status now?
Status, yeah.
Okay, so shall we do this here as well?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I always felt that this async operation event is not like the nicest way. I like status because you can say the status is either started or finished. I was also voting for just async operation, but I can also live pretty good with async operation status, and there you can understand. What?
So whenever you see async operation status, I know the naming can be a little bit overwhelming, but it basically means you have to, and the most important thing is understanding what it means, what the idea that it conveys. In our case, the ideas is basically when we have an asynchronous operation, we care the events that are related to an asynchronous operation are two events. When the event that an operation has started and an operation has finished, and optionally we have something that we get something back when the operation finishes. This gives you a really nice blocks of handling what to do when something started and something has finished, so that you can update the states in these two between these two changes. So this is what the type conveys, and then the meaning is important.
Yeah, definitely.
We try to come up with the better names, but for now it's async operation status.
So if you have any awesome like epiphany about what this type should be called, let us know, definitely. Okay, so before we start coding, and I'm saying this now for 25 minutes, so awesome before we start coding, but I think it's good to show the basic ideas and the basic concepts behind this. I want to show you what we are actually having at the moment. If this would work out here, this looks really bad. Let me see.
Maybe zoom in a little bit.
So this is what we had last time, right? So we had. So this is the architecture of the application that we are having now. So we get the update. The update function triggers a command. We have this command of async that we built. That loads the story items. Then we ask the hackernews API to get those IDs. So again, it's not the best API ever, but we can't really do anything about it because it's not ours. And then we are parsing those IDs, put them into a list. And then we make a lot of asyncs that are loading all those story items in here, and we wrap them all in an async parallel. So this is pretty similar to a promise when all this stuff. So we were waiting for all async operations to complete in some way, and then in the end we just choosing the ones that are successful. So in our case, it's just the ones that have a sum in there, and it's not a none. And then we put them into the story items hackernews lists, and we put this in there. We say it's resolved. We update this, and then we can actually start our new view or render cycle where we can show all this stuff.
Yeah, so as you can see, the diagram starts with update and finishes with update. So when the first update is triggered, it's triggered with the started event of the operation that loads these items, right? And it finishes with story items.
Yes.
Hopefully. So the last thing we get is story message, load story items has finished, and it resolved with some story items, and this message is then handled to the update function before to process the next state from which the user interface is computed for the next render.
Yes. Okay, so and what we want to achieve, and I can't do this now because I moved this. Let me just check. Can I? Let me see. Can I? No, that's not the.
Let me check if there are any questions.
No, not yet. I'm checking, but not yet.
All right.
So let's make this a bit bigger as well. So this is what we are going to do now. So do you want to go, or should I?
Yeah, so instead of having a single operation that loads everything in parallel, we don't have to. We can have we can have a single operation that loads the IDs, and from there we don't have to aggregate the operations into a single one. We could just run separate operations also in parallel, but without having to wait for them, basically. So instead of aggregating the asynchronous expressions into a bigger async expression, we say, well, aggregate the commands into a bigger command. But the thing is about aggregating the commands using the command.batch function is that it doesn't wait for commands to finish.
Just fires them off.
Basically, it fires them off and whatever they return or where they not, that's not of interest. Actually, commands cannot know whether something has finished or not. It's basically just fire and forget. And from each command, we might get a loaded story item event. These commands result in separate events which are handled by the update function separately. And because they are handled separately at different times, you get the application updates every time and updates the state in the user interface. So the user can really see what's happening as different data come in or not, if something goes wrong, of course. So that's really the gist of it. Instead of having this async parallel, we can have batch, which throws a bunch of async operations in succession.
Okay, cool. So let's build this. Before we start to build this, last one thing. There's one question, which is the from Edgar. How you manage the different tab states. For example, if a tab has more than one message. So this is, I don't get this. So in the current state of this application, we have this current stories here, which is just one case of this discriminated union over here. So this is basically the state of the tab. The messages are not really.
There's only one message, which is change stories.
Yes.
So the only message that gets dispatched is change stories when the current stories is not equal to the stories that are being rendered for a specific tab. So when you click on the new tab and you're in the top tab, then that's a change. Then that triggers a change stories event. And from that event, we start loading the items from the newly changed stories, basically.
Yes. That's it, basically. I hope this answers the question.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, hopefully. So we are a bit ahead of the stream, so let's just keep going. If there are any questions,
I mean, for a multi-page app, for example, if a tab has one message, I mean, for a multi-page
maybe
app.
This is maybe something different. If we have an app that has basically a built-in router or router, and each tab is its own application, then each tab has its own messages, and then there are means to actually deal with this. There are a couple of things to do. First of all, you need to map between the message types. And second, we need to check if we are on the right page for a given message. But I guess this is quite a nice topic for another stream, I say. Just to build a router with a multi-page app, and how to deal with this. Because there are really a couple of things to do, what I just said. We need to map the messages, or the dispatcher basically. We need to map the returning commands. And we need to take care of a couple of things. So I would defer this now to a different stream, because
I see what you did there.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, we will do this.
Yeah,
definitely.
The multi-page apps are definitely like a topic of their own, and we can do them justice in this one. But I think I get. I understand what you mean. The thing is, if the tabs route to different applications, like Roman says, then we have what we call child programs
Yes.
and
Child
parent
components,
programs,
programs, however
child components or
yes.
programs, however you want to call them. And then the parent has to manage the states separately. But here, if we would add a router to this one, we will basically be just routing the URL piece that says top or new
Yeah.
to the change stories event.
It's just a view thing,
that
basically. We could make where is my mouse here? Wait, stop moving. We could just put them all on one page. So this is basically just one page, and we could make this all in one page and show them all. This is just basically just one page. So yeah, let's just finish this here or quit this here, and I think it could be a topic already for the next stream, maybe next or the one afterwards. But I think it's a really important topic, and we will cover this pretty shortly.
Surely.
Nice. So let's start finally. Half an hour of talk, no code. Let's change this.
All right. So we started off last time saying by modeling the types of our asynchronous operations. So we have the load story items, which loads a bunch of stuff, and it ends with a list of them.
Yes.
This is what we said by saying that a single operation ends with a single list, because the lists are aggregated. But now we don't end up with a single list. We end up with separate items. And the same goes for the story item. We do not keep track of a single list of Hacker News item, but instead we keep track of like we talked about the deferred type last time, which is basically saying that some deferred value that we do not have yet, that we want to load from somewhere, can be either in the following states. Can be in the state where that value has not been requested yet, has not started yet, has not been requested. The request has not initiated, or that the request is in progress after that the operation has started, or that it has resolved, it has finished, it has completed with some value of t. Where we chose that the result would be a list of Hacker News item or some error message. But now we don't have a story items. It's not a single thing that is being loaded. It's a bunch of things that are being loaded at the same time, each of which is itself something that is deferred.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we can say that a deferred story item, it's a type alias, which says that this thing is almost this guy,
yes,
but without the list.
Yes.
Here we're saying a deferred story item is basically some Hacker News item which we don't have yet, and the story items will be a list of these things. So but not just a list, a deferred list of these things.
Yes.
We still use a deferred of these things because the entire operation has to first wait for the IDs, which is the thing we're waiting for here.
That's why we can't start it immediately.
Yeah, that we cannot have a value immediately. It's deferred because we need the IDs first, and from each ID we start loading the individual deferred story items. So here you could say, well, I have a deferred of a deferred. Yeah, it gets complicated. Thanks, Hacker News. So we have a list of these things, but that wouldn't be quite correct. First of all, because we're not accounting for failure,
yes,
right? So we account for failure by saying it's a deferred list of string. So when something goes wrong, that's it's a result of some these things, which are the deferred Hacker News items, or some error if we could not load the IDs, right? But then this wouldn't make sense at first, because if because when we initiate every request, then all the items will be in the in progress state.
Yes.
Right? And then you would have a list of things that are called in progress. But then when some item has finished loading,
Yes.
we cannot know which item which item in the list has been loaded. We have a list of in progress things, but we cannot identify these things.
Not at all, actually, right? Because we can't really unwrap
not at
them.
all.
Yep.
We do not know which one has loaded and which wasn't. So what we do is we say it's not just a deferred story item list, but also but we can identify each item by some identifier, which would actually be the ID of the story item that is being loaded, right? So when an item has finished loading, we do not only get what item has loaded, but also which ID, the ID of it, which is actually available in the parsed value.
Yes. And then we needed to actually run through the list all the time to find the real one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and a tuple of a value and an identifier and some value list is also a mapping between that integer and that item. I personally prefer to use map to
Yes, definitely.
To identify.
So it's a dictionary, right? So for everyone,
it's a dictionary.
It's basically a dictionary or a key value hash thing, where the key has a specific type and the value has a specific type because we're in a statically typed language, and but the access is much easier in that way. So we don't need to actually like map or fold or filter all the time over some list and get the ID out of it. We can just use the map and have a nice syntax or a nice access possibility over the key.
Yeah, it also this is the most important reason for me is that it enforces the uniqueness of the items. So you cannot have two items that have the same ID in the list. So because it's a hash, that just doesn't work. All right, so now we have quite the type here. The model gets complicated, but I think this starts to make sense when we render it. Mm-hmm. Shall we just move on to the render function before even the update? Because I think it makes the render will make the user interface a lot more like when you see what you're going to render, it makes it a lot easier to think about it. So now we will just forget about the update a little bit. And let's see, we have render tab, which we won't touch for now. We have a helper function div that makes classes nicely. So we have a render item, which takes a hackernews item, which is actually a resolved one, right? And renders it. It renders the layout, like the column, the column and the icons, and it renders the actual content of the URL, like the title and the stuff. But actually, this part here, like it's now rendering a resolved item here, and these two parts are for when a hackernews item has been resolved. What we want is that we want each separate item to have its own spinner.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing what we are going to do in here, we put a deferred item in there, right? So in this item, so this is not a resolved one anymore. So do you want to put this in here, the whole? So
no, not here. I want to keep the container type in a function, and then have the content be switching over the state of the result item. I think I can cheat a little bit because I have the finished function here. Yep, there you go. That's actually thing. Let me copy paste. So we have render items, which takes the list. Before we have a list. Oh, sorry. Keep this one. And boom. I think I missed a line.
Yes.
Yeah, I did. So now I have something called render item content, which takes an actual loaded Hacker News item. So this means this function runs when I have an item.
So this is basically, can we just to show the type again? This is basically here so this deferred is resolved and the result was okay. So we have basically the final unwrapped Hacker News item. So this is the function that renders the case where we have deferred is resolved of type okay Hacker News item.
Yeah, it will be more clear if you just show the function below, because that's where the pattern matching happens against all the items. So we have this item here, Hacker News item, that renders the content of it, okay, the content of an actual loaded one. And we have the render story item, which renders a deferred story item. So at this point, the render story item, it takes a deferred of a result of a Hacker News item or a string. And this one knows how to handle whether the story item has been not requested yet, in which case it will render nothing. That nothing will be the content of the individual boxes, right? If it's in progress, then we show the spinner, which I don't have in here. That's okay. This is the spinner you see per story item. If it's resolved with some error, then render the error using some header element. Or when it's resolved with OK, with story item, then render the content of that item. And put that all in this container of a box, because the box element is the thing that has like a little shadow box, and the content of which will be depending on the state of the deferred story item. Does that make sense?
Yes, for me as well. Yeah, it does.
Cool. Let us get the spinner. I'll cheat a little bit again. That's the spinner, which is just a font awesome icon.
Yeah,
actually.
that has this cog and it spins. Yeah. Yes.
It spins. Okay. You will see something here that it's actually not compiling because of the update function hasn't been updated yet. But here I have URL. I have URL be like an option of a string and not just a string, because I discovered using this technique that actually the parsing failed for some items that don't have URLs actually.
Okay, and that was the reason that sometimes a whole page was blank then, because we had sometimes. Oh no, yeah, it could be.
I think where every item didn't have a URL, so the whole page didn't load while we were testing. So actually we have to change the URL of the item to some option of a string, depending on whether it's there or not. Let's see where that goes.
It's up there.
So we have the item. Here. It's not a URL, but it's a URL option, which means that's not how we need to decode it. So here it says this field is required at the URL path, but it's not required. It's optional. Right? So optional will check whether this actually exists in the JSON before actually decoding it, and if it does not, then it becomes none basically. And that's how the render function handles it. If it's you might have an old version of Phillies. That's okay. But again, we have item, and if it has a URL, then we show an anchor. If it doesn't have a URL, we just show the title in a paragraph.
Yes. So shall we take the target blank off for now, or?
Yeah, sure.
So let me just. So
in latest Feliz, this is an actual property that makes the link open up a new page when that's not the case. It doesn't compile because we still have to change the update function. But still, we now have a simple function that renders a story item based on its state. So it takes a deferred story item, of which we do not know whether it has been loaded correctly or not. It takes it, whatever it is, and it renders it as a box, basically. But we don't have just one deferred result of a Hacker News item. We actually have a mapping of them, right?
Yes.
So this mapping will be somewhere in here, and I will copy paste things again. Let me know if you don't like the copy pasting thing. I mean, I could write the whole thing, but I'm pretty sure it's really painful to watch.
Have a lot of typers in there. Yeah, we're trying this out.
Yeah. All right, so I have this thing. Paste. There you go. So story items takes a deferred result of our map and takes that map and takes all story items from that map and renders the story item. So let's see, what's that? Yeah, so it takes a deferred story items, right? Shows nothing at first. So this part is for when we're loading the IDs of the story items. We take the state of the loading of the items, all of them. So if it has not started yet, show nothing. In progress, show the spinner. Render error probably for the error parsing of the IDs. Or we have OK of items, but these items are mapped, like the map we talked about. It's a map of IDs that map to the deferred story items, which we can simply
map over, make a list of it, map over it, and then we put this into the render story item in here. So if you have never worked with this or don't know, if you have like a map and you make it you use the toList function, you get a list of tuples out of it. So the key will be the first item in each tuple, and the value will be the second item in each tuple. And this is what we make use of it here. Okay.
So I think this is a really nice way of showing how Elmish can take this complex model and basically just pattern match over the possible cases. When you see these two functions, render stories and render story item, it's actually not that bad.
Yeah.
When you have to model the type in the state, it may be a bit complicated, but once you have that in place, writing this function is actually quite simple.
Yes. I also really like this, and it helps understanding the type. So if you see this here, the deferred of a result of a map of an int deferred result Hacker News item can be a bit like mind exploding.
Overwhelming.
But if you like really unwrap this and see how you can just pattern match over them, it makes the whole thing much clearer.
Yeah. Thank God we don't have to actually write out this type in the function in the parameters.
Definitely.
All right, so we have this thing which renders the stories. I think we could just use that inside of the... Yeah, we could just remove this from here because that's like the old one. And the render function just keeps working. Nice. So the tabs are kept as is. Render stories now takes this complicated thing and turns it into nice blocks of deferred stuff. And now we turn to the big guy, the update function.
Yeah, this is where now the heavy lifting comes into, right?
The heavy lifting. I mean, the heavy copy pasting goes into paste. So we have a couple of things we have to take care of, which is actually the events, right? When we think about which events cause the user interface to update, it's no longer the load story items that might end up with either a list or not, right? Because we're not only waiting for the loading of all the items, but we are loading also the individual items. So we have an event.
Okay, give me just. I need to interrupt you for 1 second because my sound just stopped working. Can you say something? No, it's not.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's back now. Sorry. Bluetooth. Yay.
All right.
Okay, it's back now. Cool.
Cool. Nice. All right. So when we had the type, story items, let's see them here. So now we have a different load story items. Actually, I should have to rename it to load story IDs, right? Oh. So the first asynchronous operation that we care about is loading the IDs of the story items, and then from each of these we will issue a request to load from each of these integers.
Yes.
We will issue a command that loads story items. From each of these commands might or might not dispatch this other event, loaded story item. So after we have these integer lists, we take each integer and issue the loading of the individual lists, and wait basically for this loaded story item to happen and have the user interface act upon them. So, which means that in the init we will be having a load story item IDs, and instead of loading so this one loads a single item,
yes,
which returns
an option.
We might want to change that to loading a result of a string,
yes.
right? Because now we can
actually react to some
errors.
Yes, and show to just the specific ones.
Yeah, because now the individual ones also have the state where the resolved state can end up in an error, so we can show that error. That's how I found out that some URLs didn't work. So let's see. It's actually really simple. We just the load story item. Where is it? There you go. All right. That's load story item. Hey, we don't have the...
Yeah, let's take this off first. Oh, no, we have this here.
We do? All right.
I just put this over here. We did the active pattern also in the last one. So we can change this back here to HTTP. Okay.
Yeah, so here we have a load story item function, and this one actually doesn't return a result of a story item. This one returns a message right away. We have already wrapped the result, like whether it's okay of a story item or an error of some parsing error or an error of some HTTP error. Already we wrapped it up in this loaded story item message that will be dispatched from the command. Which means now load story items doesn't really work because it wants to load everything.
Yes.
But once we have these IDs, we can already say, well, you're done.
Yeah.
So we take our load story IDs because that's exactly what we want.
Yeah, and put this message into there.
So we return, I guess, load story item IDs. It's finished with story IDs. So it's just this one because that's the first asynchronous operation. We do not need those things. We still need to take the first 10, right?
Yeah. Yes. And we just put the first 10 IDs of the story IDs because we don't want to request all of them and filter them out later.
Yeah. So I removed the bang here because it's not async anymore. Necessary. These won't be necessary, so I take the first 10 IDs and return them here. And otherwise, everything should just return that message.
Yes, exactly. So we can take this off here, and we can also take this one away. But yeah, what we did now is that we have basically, at first we had just one message, which had covered pretty much everything. But because we want to actually command batch all the other requests later on, we actually introduced a new message that is only, or a new command that is only covering loading the actual IDs before we are spreading out all the requests.
Yeah, so instead of one operation, we have one operation that is needed initially, which is this one that gets the IDs, and then from the IDs we will branch off, basically have from each ID have a new command, basically. Yes. All right, so we can take this load story items, which is, let's see, where is it being used here. When we change the stories, then we have from async load story items. That works nicely.
Yeah, but let's call it load story IDs.
Yeah.
So it's this. Oh no, I'm not going to rename it. Or let's just put it here, load story IDs, and then we can see that this one is the one that we have changed, and down here we should see now that the other one is not working anymore because we don't have this function. Okay.
Yeah. So I changed this one to IDs as well. Okay. There you go. Thanks, Cyanide. All right. So once this thing has started, basically do the same thing that change stories does, but instead using the current stories. Being a little bit too lazy here.
Yes.
All right. Load story items started, then start loading the items, and once those are finished, then we want to do some interesting stuff, because the story items, when they're resolved, they need to be initialized with a map. Right? So we have the items, we have the
IDs.
Item IDs. I guess I'll do it like that. Let's see, story IDs. Every time. See, that's why copy pasting is much better. All right, so I make it such that this block only handles when I finished with some story IDs, which are a list of integers.
So we're mapping over them now and creating a tuple, or?
We will create a map out of them.
Yes.
Because that's what story items
needs. I was just I just was thinking of creating and then use the map of list function. But what are you planning to do?
Yeah, I think I will do the same.
Okay.
So what I want to do is say the initial list. So now we have the story items, the story IDs actually are resolved.
Yes.
But they resolved with a list of story items that haven't been resolved yet. I hope that makes sense, because we still have to need to load these individual items separately. So we will say initial story initial items.
Yes.
Initial items will be map of list, where we go for ID in story IDs.
Why do you prefer using for in those cases?
When it reads nicely.
Okay.
It's a bit vague, but sometimes like for these kinds of one-liners, it reads as a single thing, right? Sometimes I see people unnecessarily using pipe just because to make it more functional or whatever.
Yeah, my default way would be to map over them and return a tuple.
Yeah, that's basically that's basically the same here, right?
Yeah, I was just asking why you're using or preferring this syntax over the other one.
Because I think it reads nicely, and I don't really have a preference here. If I use map, that would be also fine.
So now
So
we have
map of list.
like here we have the ID, right? And
Yeah, because we still want ID.
Has not started.
Yeah, because that's the state of the items that have that we still want to load.
Yeah, and so now we have here the story items is the initial items, right?
We still have to do resolved.
Oh yes.
Of OK of initial
Yes,
items.
you are right, of course. Resolved of OK of initial items.
Actually, I think we have to start with in progress, because we will actually start loading them right away from this command.
Yeah.
So we will initialize all of them using and say that every single item
is already
is in progress. From here, so this is the next state of the application in which the Hacker News item, the Hacker News application will start showing 10 boxes basically, each of which will show the spinner, because every one of them is in progress. But for the next batch, the next thing to be processed will be these commands that will run afterwards, which we will batch them. We will take a batch of a bunch of commands. We will do exactly the same thing for ID in IDs, because I want to map every ID in the story IDs into a command of its own. Can we look back to the diagram of the?
Just open this. This was that one.
Cool. So after we've parsed the story item IDs, we get this JSON, and from each ID, from that JSON, we spin up a command.
Yes.
Each of which loads a single item. We batch every single one of them and then wait for the events to happen and for the application to get updated.
So this is exactly the place where we are going to do this in our. Is it not? Wait. So.
Yeah. So. Do I write it or do you want to write it?
Go for it.
Okay. Those commands from async, and then
load story item, right?
Yeah. Story item, a single one, which takes an ID and returns an async of message, which is then converted to a command of that message. Woohoo, that's it. So this is basically the gist of this entire thing, right? Yeah. We load one operation, and when that finishes, we start.
Yes.
We trigger a bunch of them.
I think it's. I mean, we're not finished yet, because we haven't really reacted when something returns from this load story item thing. But for me, it feels a bit nicer and cleaner and easier to understand, because you can so much more of the logic is in small encapsulated things within the update function, and not in one big huge function that pretty much wraps or grabs everything from the internet, right? Like the story IDs and then everything, and then it's doing everything in one place. So I really like this this new way of actually splitting this up and having this whole parallelism done with Elmish commands.
Yeah, it's definitely something like to keep in mind of what is possible when you try to load something, and when you have these Elmish commands that can process messages. If you think in terms of messages, whether you combine a lot of information in a single message or you split the information up in smaller messages, definitely. It doesn't matter. You get the model right, and the rest of the application just falls into place. Just like here. Like for now, I don't know. For now, I have sometimes I have the feeling that I don't know what I'm doing, and like now a little bit that I have to copy paste a lot of stuff. But the thing is, when it compiles, I know it will work, right? Not because just because I have the logic, like I know what it should do, and I can see it in front of me. It says like for all of them, just start a new operation. Yeah. Okay, just wait, and now just make it compile, and you're done, basically, right? Imagine having to write this in JavaScript.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to say. No, don't imagine this. And we haven't like really had a look at the UI since we started refactoring. So
yeah, maybe let's try to finish it up. Okay, let's see if I can cheat even more, because I think we basically went over the most important stuff. We have the IDs. We have when we weren't able to load the IDs, which is fine. And then we have when we loaded a story item, right?
Yes.
So I will just copy paste these two things. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, but basically, while you're doing this, we maybe you noticed this while watching. We reached a point where it's not just like the basics examples and the counter stuff and all this, and it's similar to my event sourcing series. If you have watched it and maybe waiting for something new, but it's the same point. It gets now complicated or a bit more complex, and we need a lot of code, because now we have like real architectures, and it's really a thing to think of how to can actually convey this, and typing everything down might take 2 hours then. That's why we're trying this time with
it's already taking like an hour to copy paste.
Yes, and that's why we're trying to copy paste the stuff. So if you have any questions, just put them there anyway, and then we can go through it in more detail if we missed something.
Speaking of which,
yes,
questions. Okay, they're down.
It was the cheers Marco anyway. So if you have then any questions, we can go over it. But let us know how do you like this stuff or this new style. But I fear that if we reach a bit more complex architectural stuff, we need to copy paste, to prepare and then copy paste, because otherwise we won't get anything done in like a decent amount of time. So
yeah, I think the most important thing, like the takeaway from these things now, is that you get the train of thought.
Yeah.
How are we approaching this problem of we want this thing to happen? Okay, how do we model it? And how do you go from a real world scenario into code? Basically, that the actual code doesn't really matter. I mean, it's just putting the pieces together that are already there. It's about how you think about the model, how you think about the operations, and what is possible with them. Why do you need to identify an item that isn't there yet?
Yes.
Like it's all about information availability. How do you want to make that work in a single application? I don't think the code watching us write the code will make it better. So we'll just do our best in trying to explain it. And if you have any questions, just let us know.
Cool.
So now back to this. So now I have these two events. The loaded story item event takes an item ID, each of which takes an item ID and handles the OK of item or an error of error item. So maybe a parse error, maybe some HTTP error of an individual item again. So here's very important, because every time we get a loaded story item with this ID, we have to check the story items whether they were already resolved. Even if we know that they are resolved because we only start these operations after they were resolved. The state cannot know. The state cannot know that. So we have to check whether they're resolved. Take the stories map, the mapping, that dictionary, modify that dictionary by removing the item if that already exists. And I checked from the documentation that it says if it's not there, I don't have to check it. I think, right? So using a map gives you this nice API because you're working with maps, so it gives you nice functions to work with, modifying the new map to get a new one.
Yes. The one maybe a different angle to what you were just saying with the resolve that we need to check. It's also, I mean, it's the pattern matching is the way to actually unwrapped wrapped values, right? And in here we have a story or a story item which is wrapped in a result, which is in turn wrapped in a deferred. So in order to be able to actually access those things, we need to use pattern matching. And when we use pattern matching, we need to be exhaustive. So we actually use this thing here to be exhaustive, to not have a warning or compile time error. And if we wanted, I mean, this is pretty much an illegal state at that point. We could then inform the user that our application is not in a stable state and maybe should do something about it. But
the user.
Yeah, I don't just inform him if something is wrong in that case. Not in
You
that
probably
case.
want to do some kind of logging if you want to go
For
that
example,
far.
for example, something like this. But I just wanted to give the different angle of this is the mean to unwrap something, and this is how we do it then. So, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think in an Elmish application you can have all. There will be some impossible states. There will be, or the states that you don't care about. Let's say, of course, you could have. We could say, well, what happens when a loaded story item comes in while the story items are in progress? Well, we will just not do anything really, because that doesn't happen. But if it does, we will still not do anything, right? So we trap the state into this, what they call the sync state?
Yeah, pretty much something like this. We also will have this if we talk about multi-page apps. It's pretty much the same. And if a message comes in and we are not on the right page, we just ignore it basically.
Yeah, because the types allow for this to happen, that you are on this page, but a message comes from the other page, you'll just ignore it, because that in practice that doesn't happen.
I'm not sure. Are we really needing this remove one? I'm really not sure. Let me just go check this. I'll have a look in here. Whoa, what is happening? Did I say reload?
I don't know. Did we save?
Yeah, I hope so. What did you do?
We did well. Oh, that's really cool from Visual Studio Code. It just like saved it temporarily. Nice.
I did the wrong one. Info panel. I wanted to put the info panel. Is there an exception if it's already there or if it's updated?
I think the removing doesn't give an exception, but the adding does. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, me neither. But I have nothing.
There should be a replace function, really.
Let me just. Oh, fuck, man. I'm getting tired. I did this same mistake again.
It's okay. It's okay.
Just.
But even if you look at the documentation, Fable might do some weird stuff with the map,
Okay, so let's just keep going and finish the thing up.
Yeah, so we get an item. It's all right. We extract the map, replace the item using its ID. That's why we needed an identifier for the item, because if the item was still in progress, then we would have a list of in progress things, and we didn't know which item of them to replace, basically. But now we know there's this item of this ID, replace it, and give it a deferred state of resolved.
Yes.
And then use that modified stories map to change the top level story items and return that state.
Yes.
Same goes for if something went wrong.
Yeah.
But instead of resolved with OK, do a resolved with error and do the next state. We're almost done. I forgot one of first of all, the padding is incorrect. The indentation is incorrect. And this has to be IDs, right?
Load story IDs. No, it's all right. What do you mean? Oh yeah.
Yeah. So let me just try and make this correct. Oh, can you do it from
Yes, I can do it. I think it's a bit.
That's easier
for me.
It's a bit unfortunate that Fantomas hasn't really, like, Fantomas is cool, but it still has some subtleties when it comes to Elmish applications, especially when they're with their render functions.
Okay.
It's
I haven't.
it gives you some
I have to
really
admit, I haven't
interesting
really
results.
used it for Elmish applications because at the moment I'm really not coding that much. Doing different stuff in my job at the moment, but still haven't really tried Fantomas with the rendering stuff or with Elmish applications in general.
Yeah, I had to disable it for all F# files, unfortunately, because it does some really weird stuff with Feliz and like even the source code of Feliz, not the actual implementation. It starts doing some weird stuff. I need to make a bunch of issues there. But the thing is, Feliz has this it has a special way of indentation where like well, not special way, like this convention where you do the children in the next step. And Fantomas will sometimes will decide that things should stay on the same line or things shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering whether it will be okay if I go send a PR for Feliz only style or these kind of things. It's not popular enough for Fantomas to make its own exception for it. Let's say. So I'm still.
Or maybe we need something like
not sure
a special region or something. Don't format this code. I know what I'm doing here or something. But yeah. Okay.
For example, yeah. All right. So there's an error there. Story items. It is story ID.
Now we have a incomplete pattern match. Let me.
Okay, it's just the
that
trap
one here
state
is missing. So this is. I think we can call this episode basically copy and paste stuff, and then re-indent. Okay, yeah, that should be.
Edgar says this is really useful because I can use this knowledge to apply to Fabulous.
Yeah,
actually a lot of Elmish is applicable
Fabulous,
to pretty much a lot of stuff except for the commands where you would have to instead of executing HTTP events, you will execute stuff that are Xamarin related. Like last time I did something was with the barcode. And the barcode API is just an async, which gives you a barcode result. Mm-hmm. You can just wrap that in a command, and everything works out really nicely. Cool. All right, we're almost there, I guess, right? I mean, we're there.
So let me just restart because this was killed when I reloaded this. So I hope we are there. So I think we need to wait for the compile thing because my PC is pretty at its limits. Okay, so to maybe reiterate on this, we split this whole huge function that pretty much loaded everything from hackernews up, and now we only have a load story IDs message and this function that loads the story IDs, and when they are there, we are initializing our the items that we are going to load in a map, and this is what we are going to put into our model or into our state of the application. And for each of those items, we send a command with a command batch, so it just fires at them and forgets them, and so it doesn't need to wait for anything to return, so we just send them away. And whenever something is coming in, so either here an okay item, so everything was great, we actually add this item to our map. And if an error is coming in, so we also add this to our map, and this actually allows us then here, down here, in our render function to react to specific states of specific items. So we can then say, okay, if it is resolved and we have some content, put this in here, and if it's resolved and we have an error, put this in here. And especially we have the spinner for each item. So it basically requests all on their own. And now I've talked as long as I could and re-explain everything, and we're almost there recompiling. I have really no clue why it's like this, but we still have an error.
Failed to compile. Interesting. What is it saying?
Spinner.
Fable did not have too much. Okay, we have 2 spinners.
But why is it?
Or maybe do I have a spinner in extensions and it was already?
Oh, we have problems here, so we duplicate definition of spinner in app. Oh, look. Now we also have it like in red. So which one is the correct one? Are they the same?
They're the same.
Okay, so I kill this.
Nice. Terminal.
Yeah, it compiled.
Recompiling.
So we can start this. Did it? No, it's not that one. It's not done. Let me just reload it. I don't know, because maybe I. No.
Yeah.
That's it. Have you seen this? I hope you have seen this, that we load the story IDs and then we see that each and every story item actually.
Maybe you should add a delay for each item to show that they are loaded separately.
Yes. Let me just.
The delay that was.
Put it in there. We can put
Yes, please.
Where do we want to put it? You had this.
In the load story item. In the individual item.
We had the where is it? Load story item. We can actually use something like this, right? We can kill this maybe here, so we do not need to wait in the beginning.
Yeah, but I want them to wait in different times, you know?
Yes, so we need this here.
Yeah, and then just before that, we will need to.
Let rand. What is it? It's random.
It's just system.random.
Yes.
And then constructor.
Yes.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. So now we basically simulate high network latency per item. So each one of them will take between 1 second and 2 seconds to load, as you can see now, where every one of the items are being loaded individually, and the user starts seeing information as soon as they are available.
Yeah, nice. Really cool. Nice. So 1.5 hours again. Not too many hiccups.
We're pretty consistent with this. I didn't expect it. I thought we wouldn't make it.
Same for me every time. I think maybe this time we're maybe done in an hour or 50 minutes, but it's nice. Okay, so that's it basically. We have talked about this.
That's the application.
Sorry?
That's the application basically you wanted to build.
And that's also where we are going to stop with the application. As always, or not as always, but as whoa. that was loud.
I guess I have guests.
So if you like, you can do some homework. So what are some ideas what we could build in there?
I need to mute my stuff for a second.
Go for it. So
how can I do that?
I don't know. Maybe I can mute you, but then I'm not sure.
Do you hear me?
Wait, no, you're really bad. Change it back. I muted you because he has to do something. All right. So if you actually want some homework to do in your thing, an idea would be, for example, you could implement a load more button. So you could put a button down here, and you could ask for more story IDs to load if it's actually if there are actually any left. So let me just unmute it again. So in the end, so you should be back now. But now you have an echo. You changed something, and now you have an echo in there. Yes.
Do I? Let's see. What about now?
Cool. So I just told them if they want to do some homework, they can implement a load more button. where
Cool. Nice.
where we can actually load more story items, or you can, I don't know, sort those things by points, and you need to sort them when they come back then later on. And this,
yeah, you can sort the ones that are loaded first, so that you don't see the ones that are in progress on top. So basically, the ones that are resolved always go on top.
And then you can also like sort them with the points, like a descending order with the points, the highest points on top, and stuff like that. So, but yeah, we would be happy to again to review your code or give you some feedbacks. I think every time someone gave us some homework, we were actually reviewing it. So
definitely.
we would love to do this. And if you are interested in this, just send some PRs. I will put this on the GitHub repo so that you can have a nice starting point in there.
Yeah, let us know what you think and what you want to see for the next time.
Cool. So I think we have one idea with multi-page apps. I think it's a really nice thing, and then we could talk like the difference between maybe multi-page and having different subcomponents on one page and how they might differ from message-wise. And so I think there is a lot to talk about. If you have any other questions or any other ideas, just send them to us on Twitter or put them in the repo. We are more than happy to actually do more. I'm not so sure about how often we can do those streams. Our initial plan was to have something like every 2 weeks, but it's not feasible for us at the moment. So we try to do it something like every month. So
if you have any questions, you can also hang out at the F# Slack. I'm usually there, so if you have any questions,
I'm not at the moment. Sorry.
Show it in the web channel, sub channel, or the general channel.
Yes.
People are usually up there.
So,
all right.
I think that's it.
Shall we wrap up?
Thanks for watching. It was good fun, and see you around. Bye bye.